Hi, this is Christine from The Ordinary Sacred, and this is a video on shadow work part 2. And if you want to check out part 1 about what is the shadow, you can go back and check that out. But right now I'm going to give you an overview of a very specific shadow work practice that I have made that is a hybrid between Dr. Joe Dispenza's meditation technique and a shadow journaling practice that I learned from Aziz Gazipura. And I've kind of put them together, and you can do them as a meditation or a journaling exercise. But before I go into the details of it, I wanted to tell you kind of a disclaimer. So, while I believe that shadow work is incredibly beneficial for healing trauma and just for personal growth so that the shadow is no longer controlling you, just a sense of stability. While I believe that it's incredibly beneficial, I want to give a warning in a sense that shadow work can be very draining and even disturbing. It's kind of like if you have a wound and there's a lot of pus in the wound, and you've got to cut it open and get that pus out. It's going to be painful in that process, but in the bigger picture, it's worth it so that you don't have an even bigger problem and develop an infection and have to get your whole finger chopped off, right? And so this work is very, very important, but you need to understand that it can bring up some pain. So I would say that it's really important that you have a good grasp on some kind of self-care techniques, self-compassion, emotional regulation techniques, and that when you practice this, you know to give yourself some space and some time to kind of recuperate. If you become too overwhelmed, you want to stop and seek out support from someone that you trust. And you may even realize that you want to take it into a safe environment with a therapist. Okay, so I want to tell you that, be prepared that it will bring that kind of thing up. It's helpful to know that and to give yourself the care that you need, but it is worth it. Carl Jung says we must descend before we can ascend. And so you've kind of got to go into the shadow and expose some of the things so that it no longer controls us and we can have growth from it. So I'm just going to show you back here. How do I observe my shadow? I mentioned in the last video, Red Hawk says, if I see it, I don't have to be it. Again, when you bring it into your conscious awareness, then it's no longer controlling you. You have control over it. It's assimilated, and you've kind of grown to a place of more stability. I'm going to show you this specific shadow meditation technique. Like I said, it's a combination of Dr. Joe Dispenza's meditation technique and a technique by Dr. Aziz Gazipura. The first thing is what's called induction, and I'm going to come over here and explain that to you. So the first thing you're going to want to do when you do this technique is you're going to want to find a place that feels safe to you, that has very few distractions. I would suggest that you do it during daylight because that feels more safe. And you want to sit in a comfortable chair with your feet grounded on the ground and your hands resting comfortably on your thighs. Just sit, take a few deep breaths, extend your exhale. You're going to bring your body into a place of more relaxation. Now, induction is what brings your brain waves from their normal kind of beta active state to a more alpha or theta state, because that's where you're going to have more access to your subconscious and your unconscious. So that's why this step is really important. Now, the way that I do induction is that while I'm sitting there, and you can have your eyes open or closed depending on what feels safer to you. You want to feel safe. But what I do is as I'm sitting there, I imagine that the room is filling with water. So it will gradually go over my toes, my feet, my shins, over my thighs, my stomach, etc. It's just gradually going up until it's over my head. And this for me takes about 5 minutes. It could take 5 or 10 minutes. You're just sensing that the water is gradually covering your body. Now, if that feels claustrophobic to some people, to feel like they're in water, you can do an alternative technique where you just imagine the space that each body part takes up in the greater space. So you would imagine your toes and how much space they're taking up, your feet, and you would go up your body in that same way. And these techniques, again, are getting your brain waves to theta waves so that you can be in a state in which you can access your subconscious. This is not really like hypnosis. You're not going to be out of control of yourself. You're just more relaxed. Okay, so that's the first step. It takes about 5 minutes. Okay, then the next step is super important. You're going to imagine that you are surrounded by a source of unconditional love. Now, this source, you can imagine it to be a bright white light, a big bubble, just something that encapsulates you, that has no judgment, is completely loving and accepting of you. Now, if your understanding of God is one that is this unconditionally loving, non-judgmental source, you feel free to call this source God. However, if your understanding of God is one of judgment and shame and punishment, please don't call this source God, because it's super important that this source is unconditionally loving. Okay? Now, because under that kind of presence, you can bring up what you need to. So the next thing is, you're going to think of the gap, like your hands here, of your social self and your real authentic self. What are the things that you present to people, the self you present to people versus who you truly are? What are the things that you hide that you would be ashamed that they know? Okay, you want to bring those things up in the presence of this unconditional love. Then you're going to ask yourself questions to bring up your shadow, and they're going to revolve around anger, fear, and desire. So you might ask yourself, what am I angry with? What makes me angry? What do I feel is unjust? And you're going to let yourself feel the anger. Do not suppress it. It's not shameful. Let it come up. You might find that you grit your teeth and your fists go like this and you shake. Okay, just let it come up. Feel it in your body. Okay, and then what are you afraid of? Feel that. Feel the adrenaline come up. Let yourself feel that. And ask yourself, what have I been afraid of recently? Okay, and then finally your desire. What kind of illicit desires do you have that you would be ashamed if anybody found out about? Think about those things. Let them come up. All of these three with this spotlight of non-judgmental attention, compassionate witness. Let them rise up, because what I found is often our shadow is like a little child that just wants to be seen and heard and loved. So when we let it come into our consciousness and we don't try to suppress it and shut it up, we see it, we hear it, we are not judgmental of it, then it can quiet down. So the final thing that happens is that we feel this resolution of peace. Okay, so you might cry, you might shake, but you should come to a resolution of peace, and then you'll be surprised that that rage and that lust and everything has really quieted down and is not controlling you. So try this. Again, give yourself some space and some rest afterward. And go ahead and go to my website to find a full PDF about shadow work.